remember this one time many years ago, back when I was a freshman in college. A friend of mine who was kind of trying to be a mentor to me that year was trying to ask me some personal questions that I didn't really feel like talking about. He might have asked me something about my dad, like, tell me about your dad. And I just answered like, he's okay, I guess. And so my friend like didn't even catch on that I wasn't interested in answering those kinds of questions. And so he said something that's kind of interesting looking back now. He said, "Oh, it seems like you don't think in specific terms. You like to focus more on a broad general idea." Now, most of you who watch my channel are into MBTI, and like right away you're probably thinking, well, that sounds a lot like intuition versus sensing. Now, of course, this was years before I even heard of MBTI, and me being the unself-aware young ISTP that I had no idea what my friend was talking about, and so I just kind of took his word for it and didn't think anything of it. And now the funny thing is, years later, when I took one of my very first MBTI online tests, when it came to the question, do you like to focus on specific details or do you like to focus on a general idea? Well, I remembered what my friend said, and I was like, oh, I guess I focus on the general idea. It's not just that one incident either. Anytime I'm not interested in a subject or something doesn't apply to me, I'm not going to pay attention to the details of that thing. If I'm walking through the women's shoe department at Macy's, I'm not going to pay attention to all the shoes on the shelves. I'm just going to walk through and, get to where I'm going. And to me, it's just the women's shoe department that's not relevant to me. And so, if someone later asks me to describe it, I'm just going to say it's the women's shoe department. That is not a big picture. Lack of details is not a big picture. Sometimes it's just a lack of details. And that's something you got to keep in mind if you're trying to determine if someone's a sensor or an intuitive. Well, if they're not even interested in finding out their type, well, you're going to have a hard time with that because, if you ask them a question, like this is a classic example of sensing versus intuition, like asking someone to describe a physical object like a cup. A sensor will say, well, it's made of plastic, it's kind of clear, it's a 9-ounce cup, it's got ridges, and it's light. Whereas an intuitive might say things like, oh, it can quench your thirst, it's good for the environment if it's recyclable, stuff that's other than a physical description of the cup. Well, suppose you ask somebody to describe the cup and they say it's a cup. Okay, that person is using neither sensing nor intuition. That person is using sarcasm because they have no interest in playing your little game, and so they're just gonna give like some really brief sarcastic response. Just like I answered my friend who wanted to ask me about my dad, I just said, oh, he's okay. That's just me not wanting to think about a decent answer. And so when people are talking about MBTI and they say sensors like to focus on specific details, well, that's only the case if the sensor is interested in the thing that you're talking about. And it should be fairly obvious whether the person is just bored of the subject or is an actual intuitive. Yeah, an intuitive can be bored with the subject too, but an actual intuitive answer is going to have some substance and depth to it beyond the obvious. So if the person gives you just that surface answer with no details and no depth to it, just talk about something else. And that's true whether or not you're trying to assess their MBTI type. If you're just having a normal conversation and they give you just like these one-word answers, they're bored with the subject. Don't talk about that anymore.